This interesting story begins by showing a family traveling somewhere in a car. The husband and wife had a child with them who didn't seem happy at all, almost as if he wasn't their real son. The scene then shifts to a man named Bjorn, who had come to enjoy a holiday with his wife and daughter, Angela. Bjorn was staying at a farmhouse where several other couples were also present. Everyone was having a great time enjoying every moment. Suddenly, a man named Patrick approached Bjorn. Patrick needed an extra chair, so he politely asked Bjorn for his chair so he could sit with his family. Bjorn, not wanting to refuse, handed over his chair. Patrick thanked him and took the chair to his family, which consisted of his wife and his son, Ben. Over time, Bjorn and Patrick's families started bonding and having fun together. One evening, during a group dinner with all the tourists, Patrick stood up and thanked everyone for their help. He even gave special thanks to Bjorn. Patrick revealed that he was a professional doctor and offered to assist anyone in need. The families continued to enjoy their time together. One day, as Bjorn was walking with his wife and daughter, he realized that Angela had misplaced her toy. To find it, Bjorn stayed back to search while his wife and daughter waited. After searching for a while, Bjorn finally found the toy and headed back to his family. When he returned, Bjorn noticed that Patrick's family had joined his wife and daughter. Patrick's family was engaging in conversation with them. Bjorn joined them and noticed Patrick praising his wife and Angela, saying they were very helpful. Bjorn also chatted with Patrick's wife but found it odd when he tried to talk to their son, Ben, who seemed scared and didn't respond. However, before Bjorn and his wife could think much about it, the two families continued enjoying each other's company with pleasant conversations. So, they decided to have dinner at another restaurant. During the meal, Patrick discovered that Bjorn's wife was a vegetarian but occasionally ate fish. That day, she felt like having fish because it seemed appealing with the excellent sides being served. She ordered fish for herself. Patrick, for some reason, kept staring at Bjorn's wife and appeared impressed by her behavior. Meanwhile, Bjorn noticed Ben and the peculiar way he was eating noodles, as if he had never had such food before. Everyone continued enjoying their time, and after the vacation ended, both families returned to their respective homes. However, a few days later, Bjorn and his wife received a letter from Patrick. The letter contained many photographs of the moments they had spent together. Patrick also extended an invitation to visit his home and stay for a few days. Bjorn and his wife felt pleased by the gesture, thinking how kind Patrick's family was to invite them as guests and probably treat them warmly. Yet, Bjorn and his wife hadn't decided whether to accept the invitation. For the time being, they shared this with some friends over dinner. The friends encouraged them, saying if Patrick's family had invited them, they should definitely go, declining might offend them. Considering this, Bjorn and his wife decided to visit Patrick's home. After wrapping up their tasks, they set out for Patrick's house. To their surprise, Patrick's home was deep inside a forest, far from the city. After several hours of traveling, Bjorn finally arrived with his family at Patrick's house. It was situated deep within the forest and was quite small. However, ignoring these details, Bjorn entered with his family. Patrick and his wife were overjoyed to see them again and gave them a warm welcome. Patrick showed Bjorn and his wife their room so they could settle in. Meanwhile, Patrick's wife took Angela to her room, where Ben was also present, sitting quietly. Ben still hadn't spoken a single word. Angela noticed something odd. Despite being guests, they were being asked to sleep on the floor. Typically, guests are given better accommodations, but Patrick's family explained they lacked sufficient facilities. Bjorn's family decided to adjust without complaining. Later, Patrick started preparing meat for dinner. As it was nearly ready, he offered a small piece to Bjorn's wife to taste. Patrick was already aware that she preferred eating vegetables, but he insisted she try it. Not wanting to offend, Bjorn's wife tasted it and found it surprisingly delicious. During dinner, everyone sat together, enjoying the meal and sharing conversations as if they were one big family. It was hard to tell they were from different families because they were so comfortable with each other. Bjorn excused himself to throw away some trash outside. While outside, Bjorn heard strange noises coming from inside the house. Curious, he peeked through a window and was startled when Patrick's son, Ben, suddenly appeared. To Bjorn's horror, Ben opened his mouth to reveal that his tongue had been cut off. Bjorn was frozen with fear, but before he could ask Ben anything, Patrick shouted loudly from inside, scaring Ben, who then ran away. This incident planted a seed of doubt in Bjorn's mind about Patrick and his family. Later, as the two couples were chatting in the hall, Ben started screaming loudly from his room. Strangely, Patrick and his wife ignored it completely. When Bjorn tried to bring it up, Patrick casually explained that Ben often screamed like this because of his missing tongue. He assured Bjorn that it was normal for them and that ignoring it was the best way to handle it. This response made Bjorn even more uneasy, though he kept his suspicions to himself for the time being. The next day, both families decided to spend some time at the beach. Angela was particularly excited because they also visited an amusement park, where she got busy playing on the slides. However, Angela struggled to slide properly because Ben was sitting at the bottom and refused to move, despite repeated requests. When Patrick noticed Ben's behavior, he angrily confronted him, scolding him harshly. Bjorn's wife felt uncomfortable watching Patrick treat Ben so poorly. She thought it was unfair to talk to a child that way. That evening, Patrick and his wife told Bjorn and his family that they were planning to go out for dinner, which made Bjorn and his wife happy, as they appreciated Patrick's efforts to make them feel welcome. They all got ready to leave. However, a man arrived at the house who was introduced as a babysitter, responsible for looking after the children. It was then revealed that only the 4 adults were going out for dinner, while Angela and Ben would stay home under the babysitter's supervision. This decision unsettled Bjorn and his wife, as they didn't feel comfortable leaving Angela alone. However, since Patrick and his wife had insisted, they reluctantly agreed. The babysitter assured them that he would take good care of both Angela and Ben, so the adults left for dinner. Instead of a fancy restaurant, Patrick took them to a small bar. Despite the modest setting, Bjorn and his wife tried to enjoy the evening. Patrick and his wife ordered drinks and a large meal, claiming they wanted to treat their guests. Bjorn and his wife felt somewhat reassured, thinking their hosts were genuinely making an effort. As the night progressed, Patrick and his wife drank heavily, eventually becoming intoxicated. They started dancing wildly in front of everyone, enjoying themselves without a care. However, the situation turned awkward when it was time to pay the bill. Bjorn assumed Patrick, as the host, would cover the expenses. Instead, Patrick handed the bill to Bjorn, leaving him to pay. This left Bjorn feeling uneasy and confused. After all, they were supposed to be the guests, and this gesture felt out of place. Bjorn and his wife ended up paying the bill because Patrick had ordered a lot of food, even though they deliberately ate very little. This felt humiliating, but Bjorn chose to let it go and focus on returning home. However, on the way back, Patrick and his wife, still heavily intoxicated, insisted on driving. Patrick blasted loud music in the car, which irritated Bjorn and his wife. Despite their requests to lower the volume, Patrick ignored them. The tension rose when Patrick's wife angrily demanded that Patrick stop fooling around and drive straight home. Somehow, they managed to reach the house safely. Bjorn's wife immediately rushed to check on Angela, concerned for her safety. To her dismay, Angela was still being made to sleep on the floor, which felt highly disrespectful. Bjorn and his wife were growing increasingly uncomfortable with Patrick's behavior. Later, Bjorn's wife went to take a shower, and during this time, she felt as if someone was watching her. She even heard footsteps nearby but dismissed them when the sound faded. Unknown to her, Patrick was lurking around. She chose not to mention this incident to Bjorn and went to bed instead. That night, Angela, unable to sleep, tried to approach her parents' room, wanting to be with them. However, Bjorn and his wife were preoccupied and didn't hear her. Meanwhile, Patrick was seen watching them through the window, adding a sinister tone to the situation. In the middle of the night, Bjorn's wife woke up with a sudden urge to check on Angela. To her horror, Angela wasn't in her designated sleeping area. Panicked, she searched the house and found Angela in Patrick and his wife's room, placed between them on the bed. Even worse, Patrick wasn't wearing any clothes. This enraged Bjorn's wife, who immediately grabbed Angela and confronted Bjorn. She demanded they leave the house immediately, explaining everything she had experienced, from Patrick's inappropriate behavior to the disturbing scene in his room. The situation had escalated beyond discomfort into a full-blown nightmare. Patrick and his wife, visibly hurt by Bjorn and his wife's accusations, defended themselves by explaining their perspective. They said that if Bjorn's wife was truly uncomfortable with eating meat, she could have refused instead of eating it out of politeness and then holding it against them. They also pointed out their financial struggles, which made it impossible for them to offer luxurious accommodations. Patrick insisted that their intentions were genuine and that they had tried their best to make their guests feel welcome despite their limited resources. Bjorn's wife, feeling conflicted, began to question whether they had been too quick to judge Patrick's family. However, the memory of the unsettling incidents, especially Angela being placed in Patrick's bed, was still fresh in her mind. She couldn't shake off her unease. As Patrick and his wife continued to defend themselves, Bjorn noticed something odd. Ben, who had been silently watching from the corner, looked distressed and seemed to want to speak but couldn't. This reminded Bjorn of the chilling sight of Ben's cut tongue. He interrupted the argument and asked Patrick directly about it, demanding an explanation. Patrick paused, and for the first time, his demeanor shifted. His expression turned cold as he claimed that Ben's silence was a result of a tragic accident. However, his tone and body language suggested otherwise, further deepening Bjorn and his wife's suspicions. The tension in the room reached its peak when Angela, clutching her doll tightly, tugged at her mother's arm and whispered that she wanted to leave immediately. Bjorn's wife took Angela's hand and urged Bjorn to come with her. Sensing that staying any longer could escalate the situation, Bjorn agreed. As they turned to leave, Patrick called out, "You're making a mistake." His voice carried a menacing undertone that sent shivers down their spines. Without looking back, Bjorn, his wife, and Angela hurried out of the house, got into their car, and drove away as fast as they could. While driving away, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Angela clung to her mother, visibly shaken. Bjorn and his wife exchanged worried glances, silently vowing to protect their daughter at all costs. They realized that Patrick and his family were far more dangerous than they had initially thought. The nightmare wasn't just about disrespect or poor hospitality, it was about escaping something far more sinister. When it came to paying the restaurant bill, Patrick and his wife were completely drunk and had no idea they needed to pay. For this, both of them apologized to Bjorn and his wife. Because of these events, Bjorn and his wife felt a little embarrassed for unnecessarily doubting Patrick's family. Now, Patrick and his wife insisted that they stay for one more day. Bjorn and his wife couldn't say no, so they decided to stay for another night. Both families started enjoying themselves and shared many moments together. While cooking, Bjorn's wife accidentally cut her hand. She asked Patrick to treat it since he claimed to be a doctor earlier. However, it was revealed that Patrick was not a doctor and had lied before. This shocked Bjorn and his wife as they realized Patrick and his family had been lying a lot. Bjorn's family also noticed that Patrick's wife was paying more attention to their daughter Angela than to her own son, Ben. She seemed to care deeply for Angela while Ben sat far away, isolated. This behavior strongly hinted that something was definitely wrong within Patrick's family. But what exactly was going on remains a mystery to be unveiled in the next part. This story ends at this intriguing middle point.